Welcome to English Learning. 1 days. The Lost Village. A love that defies time. The city heat and my escape. The summer heat in the city was suffocating. The streets were crowded, the air was thick, and I felt trapped. I needed a break. One night, without much thought, I packed a small bag, grabbed my car keys, and left. I had no fixed destination, just a longing for fresh air and open spaces. My red car sped through the roads as the city lights faded behind me. The thought of adventure excited me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. A drive into the unknown. The highway stretched endlessly before me. As I drove through the countryside, the scenery changed. The smell of fresh grass replaced the city smoke, and the cool wind rushed in through my open windows. The stars shone brightly above me, and I felt at peace. I drove all night, listening to the hum of my engine and the occasional sound of crickets outside. It was the perfect escape. A beautiful morning. By dawn, I was deep in the countryside. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and a golden glow spread over the green fields. Birds chirped in the distance, and everything looked calm and peaceful. I pulled over to admire the view, breathing in the fresh morning air. Everything was perfect, but perfection doesn't last forever. The car stops. Suddenly, without warning, my car shuddered and stopped. Confused, I turned the key again, but the engine refused to start. A sinking feeling hit me. I checked the fuel gauge. Empty. I had been so lost in my thoughts that I had forgotten to check my petrol level. Now I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no town in sight. Stranded and alone. I stepped out of the car, looking around. There were no other vehicles, no houses, just miles of open land and a narrow road cutting through it. The silence was eerie. I pulled out my map, but it didn't help. The nearest town was too far to walk, and my phone had no signal. I sighed, trying to figure out what to do next. The girl in the white dress. As I stood there, lost in thought, I saw a figure approaching from the distance. A girl. She walked slowly along the road, carrying a basket of flowers. Her dress was long and white, and her black hair shimmered under the morning sun. She was beautiful, almost unreal. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining her. A mysterious encounter. She stopped a few feet away from me and looked at me with curious blue eyes. I hesitated, then said, "Hello? Can you help me?" She didn't respond immediately, just studied me with an expression I couldn't read. Finally, she smiled gently and said, "Come with me to my village. Perhaps we can help." Following a stranger, I had no better option, so I followed her. The road disappeared into a dense forest, and I hesitated. "The village is this way," she assured me. Something about her voice was calming, almost hypnotic. I nodded and walked beside her, the trees swallowing us into their shadows. The hidden village. After what felt like an hour of walking, we stepped into an open clearing, and there it was. a village that looked like it belonged to another century. Small black and white houses stood close together. Smoke curled from chimneys, and villagers moved about in simple clothing. There were no modern buildings, no cars, no electricity poles. It felt like stepping into a history book. People of the village. As we walked through, people stopped to look at me. Their eyes held curiosity, but no fear. They whispered among themselves, but no one questioned my presence. The girl led me to a small house, where an elderly man and woman stood waiting. "This is my mother and father," she said softly. They welcomed me kindly, but looked at me with deep, searching eyes. A strange meal. Inside, the house was simple but clean. A fire burned in the hearth and food was cooking over it. The smell was comforting. They offered me a drink, dark brown, rich and strong. It tasted unfamiliar, but pleasant. As we ate, I asked, "Do you have petrol here?" The old man frowned, confused. "What is petrol?" "The missing time." I stared at him. "For cars. You know, fuel." He shook his head. "We use horses." I thought he was joking, but there was no amusement in his eyes. The way he spoke, the way they dressed, it all felt too old-fashioned. Something wasn't right. The village with no cars. I looked around more carefully. There were no wires, no modern furniture, no electric lights. Everything was handmade, from the wooden tables to the clay cups. It wasn't just old-fashioned. It was another time. A walk with Mary. That evening, Mary and I walked through the village. "Your village is different," I said carefully. She looked down. "Yes, that's why you must leave before sunrise." The warning. I stopped. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. "Please, just promise me you'll go." Her voice was filled with sadness. I wanted to understand, but she wouldn't explain. The sleepless night. That night I lay awake in the small wooden bed they had given me. My mind was racing. Something was wrong with this place. Why did Mary seem so worried? A midnight escape. Unable to sleep, I decided to leave immediately. I stepped outside into the darkness, the village quiet around me. But as I walked towards the forest path, the village began to fade. The vanishing village, the houses, the people, everything blurred like smoke, vanishing into thin air. Within seconds, the village was gone. Only empty land remained. The long walk back. Terrified, I ran through the forest. By dawn, I reached a small town and stumbled into a petrol station. Gasping, I asked, "Can you tell me about the village nearby?" The town's shocking answer. The man behind the counter gave me a strange look. "What village?" "A history long forgotten." I stared at the man in disbelief. "The village with old houses, people in strange clothes. I was just there last night." He frowned, his eyes darkening. "Son," he said slowly, "there hasn't been a village there for over 350 years. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. "That's impossible," I whispered, but he shook his head. The only village that ever stood there was destroyed long ago, burned to the ground. The legend of the vanished village. He hesitated, then leaned closer. There's a story about it, he said in a hushed voice. Once every 10 years, for just one day, the village reappears, and at sunrise, it vanishes again. I shivered. The air around me felt suddenly colder. What happens if someone stays? I asked. The man's face turned pale. Then they vanish too. Memories of Mary, I felt dizzy. Mary, her soft voice, her blue eyes filled with sorrow. You must leave before sunrise. She knew. She was trying to protect me. My chest ached as I realized the truth. She wasn't from my world. She wasn't from my time. A desperate return. Ignoring the man's warnings, I rushed back to where the village had stood. My heart pounded as I searched the empty land. But there was nothing. No houses, no roads, only wild grass and trees swaying in the wind. I called out, "Mary!" But only silence answered. A deep, heartbreaking loss. I fell to my knees, my hands gripping the earth. It had felt so real. The people, the food, Mary's touch. How could it all have been an illusion? But I knew the truth. Mary had been real, and now she was gone, haunted by the past. The following days passed in a blur. I returned to the city, but life felt empty. I couldn't stop thinking about Mary. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Her long black hair, her sad smile, her hand reaching out to me. I had fallen in love with someone from another time, and I had lost her. Searching for answers. I spent months researching. I visited libraries, read old history books, and searched through forgotten records. Finally, I found something. A village named Eldenwick, burned down in 1650 by Oliver Cromwell's army. The villagers had been loyal to the king, and for their betrayal they were slaughtered. No one survived, or rather, no one should have. The truth about the curse. One old book contained a legend. It spoke of the villagers' final night. As the fires consumed their homes, they prayed for one last chance, to live, even if only for a day, once every 10 years. Their wish was granted. And so once in a decade, Eldenwick returns to the world of the living, but only for a night. The painful realization. I sat in my apartment staring at the old book, my heart pounding. I had lived through a piece of history. I had spoken to ghosts, and I had fallen in love with one. The 10-year wait begins. But then, hope struck me like lightning. 10 years. If the legend was true, then in 10 years the village would return. Mary would return. And this time, I would find a way to stay. Preparing for the future. The thought became my obsession. I counted the days, the months. I trained my body, studied ancient texts, and learned everything I could about time, curses, and old-world magic. If there was even the slightest chance to break the curse, I would take it. The countdown ends. And now, 10 years have passed. Tonight is the night. I stand here once again at the same empty field, waiting. My heart races as the wind shifts. The sky darkens and a strange mist rolls in. Then, before my eyes, the village appears. Walking into the past again, I take a deep breath and step forward. The village looks exactly the same as I remember. Warm lights glow in the windows, the scent of burning wood fills the air, and laughter echoes down the streets. And then I see her, reunited with Mary. She stands in the same spot where we first met, holding a basket of flowers. Her eyes widen when she sees me. "You came back," she whispers. My throat tightens. I promised I would. A love that defies time. We walk through the village, hand in hand. She tells me she never forgot me, that for 10 years she waited, hoping I would return. I tell her I never stopped thinking about her. We have only one night together, but this time, I refuse to let her go. The risk of staying. As dawn approaches, Mary's smile fades. "You must go," she pleads. "If you stay, you'll never leave." But I hold her tighter. "Then I'll stay." She shakes her head, tears in her eyes. "You don't understand. The ones who stay, they become part of the village. They forget their old lives. They forget everything." The hardest choice. Her words shake me. If I stay, I'll lose my memories of the outside world, of my past, of everything, except her. "Please," she begs, "live for me." My heart shatters. I can't leave her, but I can't forget myself either. A final goodbye? The first rays of sunlight creep over the hills. The village begins to fade. Mary looks at me with desperate eyes. I cup her face in my hands, memorizing every detail. I will find a way, I promise. One day, I will come back. Forever. Watching her disappear, I step back, and the world around me dissolves. Within moments, the village is gone. The land is empty again. Mary is gone. My hands tremble. I fall to the ground, staring at the place where she stood. The next 10 years begin. I have 10 more years. 10 years to find the secret to breaking the curse. 10 years to bring Mary back, to make sure the village doesn't disappear again. I will not give up, because I love her, and love can defy even time itself. Final thoughts. This extended version deepens the mystery, romance, and emotional intensity of the original story, making it a timeless, supernatural love tale. The ending is both heartbreaking and hopeful, leaving open the possibility of a future reunion. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video.